Right, everyone, Klloo. So, we're going to be going through the cards of high seas. Now, the way I'm going to do it is individual video per section. So, for instance, today we're going to focus on the mech card. So, if mech doesn't interest you, no hard feelings, right? Then tomorrow, go down the order. So, Necromancer, then Ranger, then generic. No, I skipped one. Then pirate, then generic, then the expansion slot, right? Depending on whether or not the generic takes up too much time. I haven't gone too hard into the cards just yet. Usually I like to cut out the filler stuff. There's no point really necessarily talking about them. But in the case of, say, mech, cogs are new mechanics, so a lot of the cards are, new interactions, so therefore relevant. Same with, say, Necromancer. Ranger maybe drops off a little bit, right? Because we have definitely a lot of reprints, some filler, right? Then we have the Harpoon stuff, and then just the good quality Ranger cards. Then same with Pirates, and the generics, and then, well, all the expansion slot cards are generally, matter, right? But, starting with mech. So, before we jump into the cards, let's start with a interaction highlight. So, Puffin, the second time you crank each turn, you get to draw a card, right? So this is each time, your turn or your opponent's turn. You can actually crank an item that's generated on your opponent's turn. You just simply will not gain the action point, so you're trading the Steam counter, and generally speaking, the upkeep means it will be destroyed in the case of, say, Golden Cog, for potentially that card draw. Now, can you get 2-card draw as Puffin? Well, yeah. So we have the legendary Cogworks Tinkerings. When it defends, create a Golden Cog, so that's one crank there. And then we have either Galvanize or our Sentry as another way to block and essentially generate a Cog. So Cogworks Tinkerings into our Sentry means that you can tap the cog you generate to then create another golden cog that you can then crank as well, meaning you get to the 2 cranks and you're essentially getting the extra 3 block for free. So that is really nice. In terms of the Galvanize, I don't know if it salvages them, right, because of the 2 block, but it definitely helps. So when it defends, you may destroy an item control if you do create a golden cog. So similarly, again, use Tinkerings, right, get a golden cog from that, because it's when it defends you create the golden cog. You then Galvanize it to create a new golden cog, crank both, and you get card as Puffin, right? This means that even in the case of, say, you have 1 cog, right, on board, and then you go into the double Galvanize, so Tough Old Wrench, or Teeth of the Cogs, you can Galvanize, create, right? And cranking them, getting rid of the Steam counter, not generating the action point, but still getting the draw from Puffin. So that, as a -1 4 block, is decent, but again, relies on you double drawing 2 of these specific Galvanize cards, so I don't think that necessarily helps their case, but Cogworks and Sentry is definitely a fantastic combo. Kicking it off, legendary, Poly Cranker. Now, this card, functionally, beautiful, right? That's not up for debate, so obviously it goes hand in hand with the Puffin. The second time you crank each turn, draw a card, right? And Poly Cranker is essentially one of those cranks. So it is definitely a must-have for constructed play, right? Blitz or Classic Constructed or even Living Legend one day, you want Poly to start with Puffin, and it costs you nothing since it has the Purge mechanic, right? It goes in tandem with whatever weapon you want to take, right? So that's not the big question to me. The big question is, was this really necessary as a legendary, right? So I can understand it being too powerful for limited or sealed or draft, right? So having it as a basic, for instance, or something that you can pull and then just skyrocket, right? You get that consistent couple turns of Puffin's secondary ability, right? Or at least the diversion where your opponent has to deal with Poly before they can go back to focusing on you. But we do know from the Hunted that they're not afraid to stick something that's, again, outside the power level of limited in the expansion slot. So maybe Polycranker could have just been a Majestic. Still had the beautiful Marvel in the treasure pack, right? But it as a legendary, right? It's one of those one-dimensional legendaries where it is just Puffin's thing. It's not even mech, right? And that is relevant because it would actually be really nice to have with Max and Banksy, right? As just a guaranteed way to activate that and, again, just make Banksy a bit more consistent. But that's not the case, right? Puffin goes, Poly goes, Puffin comes back, Poly comes back. We get a different pirate mech. Poly's just in the bin, right, in that sense. So I would also say from the price point, yes, the Marvel is glorious, and it's definitely currently an expensive card, but it is also definitely the one that's the most unstable. And there will be a lot of treasure packs open for people seeking the amulets, let alone the lost treasures, right? And they're rarer than Poly or the Harpoon. So, yeah. Poly's, to me, the first one's going to crack, right? In comparison to, say, the Cold Foil EAs, right? They're really functionally useful. Poly, one-dimensionally useful, right? So just keep that in mind. Now, the other legendary / equipment. So we have the Cogworks Tinkerings, Rust Belt, and the Unicycle, right? So we'll start with Rust Belt and Unicycle, because although they are basic equipment or common equipment, right? Token equipment. I like basic as the term, because that's the lowest tier. they are still really, really functional. Maybe not the chess piece since we have just better things, but instant, tap cog you control, destroy this, gain 1 resource, and instant, destroy this, untap a cog you control, but they both have battle worn, and that's the big deal, because unlike usual, common level equipment, that is effect or block, this is block and effect, and especially unicycle deserves a thought, right? Because in comparison to other leg pieces that we currently have, heavy industry gear shift, or even the Cogworks base legs, right? With the new cog mechanics, this amounts to a go again, this amounts to a +1, plus the block, so it's actually kind of a nice leg piece, right? That could be a little bit functional until it gets, eclipsed, right? Now, obviously, not relevant to AB, so there's no reason to bring in Achilles, but the other scenario is also just, quick dodge flexes. If we are open to mech not being boost or not requiring a full set of mech equipment, then, quick dodge and blues is, or even just a yellow is just generally considerably more block, right? Now, for the Cogworks Tinker Rings, right? Like it, but I wish it was a base. And I don't know. It seems like it should be a base equipment, should it not? Right? It's Cogworks, and then it's also Tinker Rings, and the image is literally just it mechanizing different parts. So yeah, I kind of wish this was a base and just more synergy with Evos, but I don't think that would have been anything wrong with this being an Evo base arms, right? That would have been really cool. Otherwise, it is still just a solid arms piece, right? We compare it to, again, what's currently in the works for mech, no AB, so no comparison for that side. But you have like Cogworks base arms if you do want Evos, or the heavy industry ram stop if you want something a bit more defensive, or the generic pieces. And in comparison, Cogworks is 2 block, and again, that cog functionality where that cog then translates to, a +1 or a go again, right? So a go again on the arm slot is fantastic. +1 is just on rate, so it is a really nice functional legendary for mech. Now, weapon-wise, we have our Cogworks Blunderbuss and our Spitfire, and they of course go in tandem with our new Cogs. So, Copper Cogs and Golden Cogs. Now, just to touch on the Cogs first off, I do really like them, because again, they put the agency on the cards that synergize with them, rather than the item itself. So for instance, think of the scripts when it comes to Mechanologist, right? Penetration script is +1. The other script that gives overpower is just overpower, right? They're not dynamic. So you find it has utility with all the cards you're playing, which is good, but they're not as dynamic as the Cogs, which currently are just either a +1 or a go again, right? Which is, again, fantastic dynamic play that is also generally as an instance, in a sense, reaction, right? So I do really like Copper Cogs as an item. I know some people don't like the flexibility for say, mech's identity, but it is something mechanically that I do feel they need. Now, in terms of the Blunderbuss, we'll start with that. So, action, pay 2, tap it to attack, and instant tap cog you control, and then this card's next attack gets go again. So, the easy comparison is obviously the Klloo Plasma Pistol. Action, remove steam counter from this attack, and action, pay 1. If there's no steam counters on it, put a steam counter on it. Now, this usually goes in tandem with our induction chamber. An induction chamber is essentially how you turn Klloo Plasma Pistol into a Cogworks Blunderbuss. But the question becomes, are you looking for a cog? Or are you looking for induction chamber, which is basically a permanent on board until your opponent disrupts it? Yeah? So, yeah, Cogworks Blunderbuss falls a little short because of the 2 cost, right? Again, Klloo Plasma Pistol with the induction chamber is 2 costs to do essentially the same effect, but in this case, the item is the induction chamber versus a 0 cost cog. So it is nice, but for instance, right, in Dash IE, obviously induction chamber is significantly more value because you bypass the 2 cost and you bypass the search, right? Now for Puffin, easier access to Golden Cog, somewhat, right? You still have to find gold or start with gold if you take Crown. I don't necessarily think that's generally worth it, but you can still get it, go again. Problem is the in-between turns, right? Where you run out of cogs or you want to use cogs for something else, then Blunderbuss goes a little bit down in power. So it is nice, it is functional, but it's sort of, to me, a Puffin thing, right? Now, again, we don't know where cogs are going to end up. Maybe it is a everybody thing and cogs are just super easy to handle, but I do personally like Spitfire a lot more. So Spitfire, other end of the Mechanologist guns, Plasma Barrel Shot, the Blaster, and our Klloo Leveler. So action, tap this and a cog you control to attack, and then you may tap an additional cog in order to give it +1, right? So it is potentially a no-cost 3, but it requires 2 cogs. That in comparison to our Plasma Barrel Shot is a 2 cost, right, to load it up, right? And then it ends your chain after you've boosted, and potentially, this is a 3 to 4, right? So a 2 for 3 or 4 versus a 2 cog 0, 3, or even a 0 cost 1 cog 2. And then the blaster, I don't think there is necessarily any way to really get this off in a single turn unless you super high roll. So generally speaking, this is every other turn, but it's a 5 overpower that just feeds into your boost. So Spitfire, to me, definitely doesn't overshadow boost in any way. But if we move away from boost, Spitfire is definitely really nice. And then Klloo Lever obviously works with Evos. But what I really like about this is that they all feel independent. Again, it's not an argument of is this better than that. It's more about the actual deck you're running. Whereas when it comes to the Blunderbuss, I think there is a case argument of if I'm going to go looking for cogs, especially if I'm not puffing, then maybe I still just want the pistol and induction chamber. Especially since Dash has ways to fetch items, right? Spark of Genius. But that's my thinking currently. Then we have our Galvanize, right? So Golden Skywarden is an interesting card. It is the only card in the set that has a functional use with a golden cog. And that really surprised me, that there wasn't more direct interaction with golden cogs. Because golden cogs are just lesser copper cogs, which is also a weird dynamic, right? So golden cogs start with 1 less steam counter, so they last a little bit less, but they're a token, so they're tied into all the other card generation and puffing, of course. But Golden Skywarden, when this defends, you may destroy an item you control. If you do, this gets +1, and then if a golden cog is destroyed this way, create a gold token and repeat this process. And the big thing to me there is that it has the +1, right? The other galvanized cards, we have Teeth of the Cog and Tough Old Wrench. Both these are just galvanized, and all they do is basically convert one item into a golden cog, which could definitely be useful. I don't think you'd necessarily want a golden cog over a premium item. So generally speaking, it's just a way to maintain a cog that's going to end up destroyed at the start of your turn. But the big downgrade is the block. So previous Galvanize, Soup Up, Cognition Field, Galvanize, and you get 2 block. Meaning that these are, 4 block cards or a 5 block card, right? So that's good. Teeth and Tough don't. They stay at 2 and generate a cog. And I'm kind of curious why they didn't at least keep the +1 that Golden Skywarden had, right? Give it a functional ability, but still make it then convert back to a normal block card. So, unfortunately, I don't like Galvanize, at least how it was handled, except for Golden Skywarden. I do like Golden Skywarden, and the fact that if you do have, a couple golden cogs, you can get this to a 4 block, you get the gold to then go into your next turn, so it is nice in that situation. Then we have the actual cog payout. So we have sets of thrice per turn, twice per turn, and once per turn. So, Jolly Bludger, thrice per turn instant, tap a cog, this gets +1. Cogworks Dovetail, tap a cog, this gets +1, or go again. And then Planetary Aeronaut, tap a cog, this gets +1. And then if it's the 3rd time you've activated this ability, destroy a defending card. And Planetary is definitely the standout one, although Dovetail is definitely really nice because of the other utility side of it, which is when this hits a hero, untap all cogs you control versus Planetary. The defending hero must defend this with an equipment they control if able. And then Jolly Bludger being an additional tap a cog to give it overpower. And then when this deals damage, steal that many items they control. That item mechanic is definitely nice, and I like that they stuck with items rather than gold. It's basically how they've differentiated a lot of cards from being for high seas versus a wider area of play. So I do like the fact that it's steal items, not steal gold. So yeah, it's still a nice, powerful card, right? So 1 cog for overpower, then 3 more cogs to get up to an 8, right? That's decent, but I still like our Dovetail and our Planetary over that because of their functionality. So the untapping of all cogs you control is a very interesting side of it, because obviously the opponent can read the card and the board state, and they can decide whether or not they can functionally block it out as a 1 for 7 with go again, because you'll probably want the go again if you're going to capitalize on the untapped cogs. So it has this level of power to it where, again, if it does land and you invested 3 cogs into it and then got 3 cogs back, all those cogs are worth 1 extra stat, and that is beautiful. But of course, the Planetary outshines, right? T-Bone with an actual destruction effect, so it can either destroy the equipment or act as essentially a shred, right? And reduce your opponent's block, making it a nice devastating card. And since none of this boosts, pummels, right? So pummel with Planetary is definitely going to be a disgusting turn. Now, for the twice per turn, we have our Cloud City Steamboat and our Cogworks Zeppelin. So, interestingly, these are all still 3 cog cards, right? Because they have a tap cog effect, and then they have the instant effect. So both are just tap a cog for a +1. But Cloud City Boats, you may tap a cog you control if you put a steam counter on a cog you control, meaning that it essentially allows you to prolong a cog, right? So it gives it 1 extra turn of usability, so it bypasses that upkeep check. And then Cogworks Zeppelin, you may tap a cog you control if you do create a golden cog. So similar, but maybe a little bit better, since you just profit another cog. Yeah, both are functionally nice, right? 3 block, no boost, just solid finishes to a turn. Then for the once per instant. Now, I really like both these cards. So they are our functional go again without boost, right? So tap a cog you control, get +1 or go again. So Sky Simmer being a 0-4 go again with a cog, or a 0-5 is definitely nice. And then our Cloud Scurf, similar, 1 for 5 with go again, or 1 for 6, and they both, of course, block 3. So really liking the non-boost package, and whether or not you take it along with boost just to, again, prolong fatigue is beautiful, or as Puffin, right, we move away entirely and we can actually take pirate cards, generics, and just have a kind of better quality deck. So yeah, I'm all for that, even if for some, this is essentially mech moving away from that boost identity, which I think is fine. I think items should generally be the identity. Maybe not so much boost, right? Boost has definitely led to some difficulties, right? If you go through all the big major bans, I'm pretty sure mech is mentioned almost every single time. And then we have our cog card. So cog in the machine, right? Create 2 golden cogs. Cogworks Workshop, create 1 golden cog. Our Sentry, tap to create a golden cog, and our copper cogs themselves. And then Puffin to create a golden cog, right? At the cost of gold. So cog in the machine is obviously the really big one here, right? Cogtane, as people are calling it. Low Cogtane, right? So create 2 golden cogs, and then you may tap a cog you control if you do put this to the bottom of its own deck. So it is essentially pay 1 for 2 cogs and an action point, right? And then it's reusable if you want to sacrifice one of those cogs. So it is just a nice, solid filler card. Those cogs will then amount to, again, a +1 or a go again. So it's a 1 for 2 or 1 for 1 and a go again proc. Or if you want to maintain the card, just one of those effects. So it is definitely a really, really solid card and probably the standout majestic for Mechanologist. Then we have our Cogworks Workshop. Create a golden cog token and put a steam counter on up to 2 cogs you control. So generally speaking, this card is create a cog, prolong 1 cog, right? Because it doesn't have go again. So unless you're using it to end your turn, which you're probably not because you want to make use of the cogs, right? You want to maintain tempo. So you're cranking the golden cog it creates, getting the action point to essentially give the card go again, putting 1 steam counter back on it so it's not just destroyed your next turn, and then prolonging another cog. So either way, maintaining 2 cogs and therefore trying to maintain 3 cogs to utilize those big functional effects is definitely really, really nice. So it's still a solid majestic if we are strictly in cogs. Then for Sentry, when this defends, you may tap a cog you control if you do create a golden cog token. That will lock you out of using the cog on your turn, or the tap on your opponent's turn, right? It means that they don't untap because it's not till the end of your next turn. But again, it's that conversion of potentially a cog that will fail, will be destroyed on your upkeep, into a new cog that is really, really nice because you won't be able to tap it anyway, right? So yeah, it is a nice solid blue block, but again, I kind of wish there was a little bit more interaction with golden cogs outside of our Sky Warden, right? To make them feel like they are a premium, not just the token version of copper cogs. But that just leaves the last package of cards for mech, and that is the untap card. So we have Lubricate, untap up to 3 cogs you control, draw back the hammer, untap a gun, perk up, untap a hero, and tighten the screws for untap a cog you control. So I do like all of these cards, right? Especially Lubricate as an instance, which can definitely make your opponent second guess whatever attack is on the chain, right? Because you'll be able to get more cogs to then go into its effect. Or for instance, you only have 2 cogs, you can still get to that 3 cog activation, or even the 4 cog, right? If it has that functional effect. So yeah, I do like Lubricate, but of course it being an instant no block is a little bit rough, right? Because generally speaking, right, think about any or most block scenarios for classes that are primarily attackers with attack reactions. Attack reactions are your blocks, right? So you can maintain your attacks, generally speaking, right? So Lubricate doesn't functionally work like that. Going into your turn, it's either going to become your pitchable or you've maintained your whole hand to get the cog value. But yeah, it being a blue, 0, potential +3 or +2 and go again, definitely nice, right? Then for the string of commons, right? Despite their 2 block, I like 2 of the 3. So perk up to me until we get more mechs with tap abilities, right? I don't necessarily think I like it for Puffin, right? It doesn't feel like you need to get to the 2 cogs. There's many other cards for you to get to enough cogs or maintain cogs. And it works back into the fact that you have to have that extra gold for perk up to matter on Puffin. But for the other 2, right? They're all 1 cost +4s to any Mechanologist attack, including weapons, so that's already really nice. But untapping a gun you control, especially in the case of say, Spitfire and action point generation, adds to just extra easy damage, or helps the blunderbuss be a bit more comparable to our Klloo pistol, right? So I would say that this makes up for the block, definitely. And then tying the screws significantly more, right? Because it's essentially a 1 for 5 with 2 block, right? Because again, that cog that you untap then goes into a +1 or a go again. So tying the screws, I think definitely sees play, right? Anywhere that obviously we've taken Gigawatt, tying the screws just easily replaces it and then has that little bit more functionality, but overall, again, solid interactions, and Mecha as a whole is seemingly a little bit healthier, right? Again, Dash IE has done wonders, right? Moving away from boost and just taking quality cards, even if it is, fatigue. So hopefully this is a quality version of mid-range / aggro, potentially, right? With Cogs in the work. So yeah, I'm glad I got into Mech when I did, because this does actually excite me to give Puffin a solid go. If not, then, translating some of this to Max. But yeah, let me know what you think. Hope you enjoyed. See ya.